Welcome to the ITFreeTraining video on Federation Services terminology. This video will look at all the terminology you need to understand in order to start using Federation Services effectively. As you can see, there are 17 different terms that I will look at in this video. Federation Services has its share of terminology, but don't worry, I have sorted them into a logical order to make it easy to understand. So let's get started. The first term that I will look at is the Account Partner Organization. This is simply the organization that contains the users that will be used with Federation Services. In this example, there are users in the domain ITFreeTraining. These users will be the users that will access resources using Federation Services. The important point to remember is the Account Partner Organization contains the users, their passwords, and other relevant information about those users. So this brings up the next question: what are these users accessing? These users access resources in the Resource Partner Organization. A Resource Partner Organization is simply an organization that hosts Federation applications. For example, these could be held in a child domain, an external business domain, or services in a cloud. The important point to remember is that a Resource Partner Organization allows users from an account partner to access services using web services. For example, a resource partner may have services like email or applications like Office that the user can access using web protocols. The next point to consider is how the Account Partner Organization and Resource Partner Organization are connected. In order to connect both, a Federation Trust is created. If you are familiar with an Active Directory trust, you will know that a connection-based trust means data is required to travel over it. Otherwise, the trust is not usable. A Federation Trust is different in that it is a non-connection style trust. This means no communication happens over the trust, unlike an Active Directory trust. It is possible to set up the trust by accessing the other company's Federation service. However, it is also possible to set up the trust manually, without access to the other server. The important point is that a certificate is required in the Resource Partner Organization, so this will need to be transferred and imported into the Resource Organization. Effectively, the Resource Partner Organization is saying that I trust the users in the Account Partner Organization and will allow them access. But how does the user request this access? In order to grant access, the Federation server in the Accounts Partner Organization creates a claim. A claim contains identification details of the user asking for the access and also which service they would like access to. Essentially, a claim is just a file. In other videos from this course, I will go into more detail about how the claim file works and how it is used in Federation Services. In this example, notice that the user and email service is added to the claim. The claim is signed by the server and presented to the other Federation server in the Resource Partner Organization. This is a simplification of the process, but you should get the idea that a claim is essentially a statement about who the user is and what they would like access to. This brings us to the next term, Claims Provider Trust. Now, we already know that a Federation Trust is required for Active Directory Federation Services to work. However, Active Directory Federation Services supports two kinds of trusts, the first one being the Claims Provider Trust. A Claims Provider Trust is normally created in the Resource Partner Organization and essentially defines how the other organization will access the resources. So this includes the basic rules for the trusts, what it can access, and who can use this trust. Or, in simple terms, defines who and how the trust is used. Personally, I think the name is misleading. You would think that a Claims Provider Trust would create claims. However, it does the opposite and accepts them. Normally, a file would be provided to the Resource Partner Organization with this information. But if it is not, the information can be entered in manually. Once created, this defines the rules the Resource Partner Organization will use to provide access to resources. The next trust that I will look at is the Relying Party Trust. It is a simple thing to say, I trust another organization's users to access Active Directory Federation services. However, for the whole system to work, Active Directory Federation Services needs to access non-Federation services. For example, when a user requests access, they must be authenticated, and this means the Federation server must contact a service like Active Directory Domain Services. This requires a relying party trust. The relying party trust in this case is essentially the configuration created on Active Directory Federation Services that describes how it will access other resources. In this example, how it will access Active Directory. The relying party trust is also used in the resource partner organization. For example, to access a claim-aware application. In order for this to occur, the Federation server must trust the server running the claim-aware application. Once again, the relying party trust is created on Active Directory Federation Services and defines the trust relationship between it and the claim-aware application. So, essentially, a relying party trust is used by Active Directory Federation Services to issue claims. If you get confused, remember, claims-provided trusts accept claims. Relying party trusts create claims. In later videos, I will look at how to create these trusts. A claims provider trust will be on one side and relying party trust on the other. If you are not sure which, ask yourself which side is accepting claims, and this will be the claims provider trust. In later videos, when I set up Active Directory Federation Services, this will make more sense. The next term I will look at is claims provider. The claims provider is the organization that provides a claim to its users. In most cases, this is the account partner organization. The claims are used by claims-aware applications, and this can happen in a number of different ways. Let's consider a domain that is holding the Active Directory Federation Services, which creates claims for its users. These claims are used to access claim-aware applications. This will normally be in an external domain, however, could also be in the cloud or, in some cases, in the same domain as the Active Directory Federation server. You can see how there is a lot of flexibility in how these claims can be used by an organization. Why would you use Active Directory Federation Services in the same domain? If a user was mobile, some organizations will place the claims-aware application in their perimeter network for the mobile users to access. This is one way a company can choose to keep their network secure. The next term I will look at is Federation Server. This is simply a server that is configured to run Active Directory Federation Services. In other words, the Active Directory Federation Services role has been added and configured. The next term is Account Federation Server. This is an Active Directory Federation server that issues security tokens to a user. To understand what a security token is, consider that you have an Active Directory Federation server and a user. The Active Directory Federation server will create a security token. Inside this security token is placed a claim. The security token is then given to the user. Thus, an Account Federation server provides security tokens to the user. So the question is, where does the Federation server obtain the information to put inside the security token and the claim? To obtain information to create a token, information is obtained from an attribute store. This is essentially a database. Common databases that are used are Active Directory Domain Services and SQL Server. So essentially, this database contains details about the users. It should be pointed out that this is different from authentication. For example, a user could be authenticated by a domain controller and then additional attributes obtained from the SQL Server. Having said this, the user could also be authenticated by a domain controller, and then details, like their first and last name, could be obtained from the domain controller. You can see the attribute store simply contains information that is used to create the claim. For example, suppose there is a requirement that all claims have a picture of the user in them. Active Directory does not include this ability by default. It could be added, but most administrators do not like adding features like this, as it involves changing the schema, which cannot be reversed once done. To get around this, after the user is authenticated, a claim is created with information like the username obtained from Active Directory. However, the picture is obtained from a SQL Server. You can see how an attribute store is used to hold information to be used in the claim. You can see that even though Active Directory can be used as an attribute store, this is separate from authentication. Essentially, the attribute store is a database that is used to obtain information to store in a claim. The next point to consider is how configuration information is transferred between different Active Directory Federation services. If you consider an account and resource organization, a trust needs to be created between these two. This can be done manually, but this involves some extra work. Rather than performing the step manually, the configuration data can be exported. This can then be transferred to the other server using any method, for example via the network, email, or through the postal service. This data is then imported into the other server. Thus, essentially the Federation metadata is the data format used for configuration. It uses security assertion markup language for the data format. It is not important that you understand how this works at present, as it will be covered in more detail in a later video. Each Active Directory Federation service instance stores its data in a database. This is referred to as ADFS configuration database. If you have SQL Server on your network, you can use this to store the configuration in. If you do not, you can use the internal Windows database to store the data in. The important point to remember is that an ADFS configuration database is required in order to run Active Directory Federation services. The next term I would like to look at is the primary Federation server. When you create a farm of Active Directory Federation servers, the first server added to the farm is the primary Federation server. This server has a read-write copy of the configuration database. If you add additional Federation servers to the farm, these Federation servers will have a read-only copy of the database. These Federation servers will need to replicate any changes made to the configuration database to the primary Federation server holding a read-write copy of the database. The next term I will look at is Federated Users. A Federated User is a user that has been provided with a claim. This claim allows them to access an application or resource. For example, if a Federation server were to issue a claim to a user, this user would now be a Federated User. The next term is Relying Party. This is simply the organization that receives and processes the claim. Essentially, this is the resource partner, so if you see this term, you know it is referring to the resource partner organization. The next term I will look at is Resource Federation Server. This is a Federation server in the resource partner organization. What a Resource Federation server will typically do is this. A user will obtain a security token from their account Federation server. This will have the claim information inside it, but does not give them access to anything. The security token is presented to the Resource Federation server. The security token is checked to make sure it is valid, and then the claim removed from the inside. This claim is used to create a new claim, and then the old claim is destroyed. The point to remember here is that this new claim is based off the old claim. This new claim defines what the user can have access to. It is then placed inside a security token and given to the user. The user is free then to use this security token to access services or resources. If this is confusing, think of it like this. It's like getting a letter telling you your driver's license has been approved. If you head off to collect your driver's license, the person at the counter looks at the letter and sees it as legitimate. They then say, "I cannot issue you a driver's license. You need to go see this person." The person behind the counter keeps the letter, but they give you another document so that you can claim your driver's license. All you need to do now is see that person, give them the document that you were given, and you will be able to collect your driver's license. A Resource Federation server works off the same principle. You give a claim to the resource server, they look at what you are asking for, and then give you a different claim back so that you can access what you asked for. These claims are stored in a security token so that they can be checked to make sure they are legitimate. The last term I will look at is Claims-Aware Application. This is any application that can accept claims. For example, a user that is given a security token from a Resource Federation server can then give this security token to a Claims-Aware application. The Claims-Aware application will then provide the user with the resource or service that they are requesting. For example, Microsoft Office is an example of a claim-aware application. There has been a lot covered in this video, but unfortunately it is necessary to get the building blocks in place before looking at how to use Federation services. I would like to thank you for watching this video and hope you found it useful. I also hope to see you in the other free Federation service videos from us. Thanks, and see you next time.